All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are today going to be reviewing a little balance patch that got posted up on Reddit Starcraft by none other than, that's right, that says user Loco TV. So Lowko, famous YouTuber and big brain Zerg player that always cries about balance because he sucks. Just kidding. He has some issues with Protoss, but don't most Zergs. He wrote up some really cool ideas. This was 3 days ago, and since then a lot of people have been reacting to it. I kind of glanced at them and was like, hey, these all mostly seem like good changes. Let's go take a look at it. But I also saw Harsam disagreed with them. Lowko then made a different one where he added a few changes, updated them. So we'll look at those. Let's just look at his first predictions or balance ideas and talk through them one by one. So first of all, lurker speed burrow is stupid. They should burrow slower. Now, I've been talking for a long time about how the lurker speed upgrade basically is permanent stim pack for lurkers. It makes them, they're already a 200 hit point siege unit, which is very tanky. Tankier, you know, than a siege tank, for instance, which they fill a similar role of. They got 25 extra hit points on a tank. The fact, though, is a siege tank takes like 3 seconds. I don't know the exact numbers. About 3 seconds to siege or unsiege, right? It takes like, now, a lurker is kind of similar until you get the upgrade. And once the upgrade kicks in, the lurker, it's like a widow mine with drilling claws. It just slides into the ground, slides out, runs off. There have been so many times Protoss players have caught a lurker player out of position. He's run 10 lurkers over, killed a base, and the Protoss comes in with this beautiful flank. And when you flank the lurkers, their splash doesn't hit many units. And you're like, whoa, this is sick. And he just unburrows and runs away and loses like one lurker. And you're like, what the fuck? Any other siege unit that gets caught out, unsupported, being flanked, dies. Lurkers don't do that if the player reacts quick enough, and that's a big problem. So the problem with the lurker is you've got this 10 range awesome siege unit. It's great. It can be mass produced suddenly. You can be on Roach Hydra and then bam, you've made 12 lurkers all at once. You need a lot of money to do that, but it's just a little bit too sharp, the power of the lurker. So I actually wouldn't mind them knocking the range on the lurker back down to 9 and stuff. But I think maybe a more targeted way is, yeah, just to make it a bit more committed. Make them burrow and unburrow a lot slower. Make it so the movement speed upgrade doesn't affect that at all. It only affects their movement, which is really cool. So you could also give lurkers burrow a cooldown is an alternative solution. Cute idea, Twitch chat. Cute idea. I think I prefer just slowing it down a little bit. But that is kind of, because that's like such an unfamiliar mechanic to me. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'd have to completely wrap my head around it. So yeah. So lurkers do burrow and unburrow very, very quickly. Both of those get boosted by that upgrade. So I like the idea of nerfing that, and I've been saying my two big balance patch changes are that and get rid of the Void Ray buffs. Now, he's actually only said get rid of one Void Ray buff there, right? Revert Void Ray build time there, 6 seconds. But they also got made cheaper, and they got made build faster, and they got made to move faster. So I wouldn't mind nerfing the lurker a bit more and nerfing the Void Ray a bit more personally, knocking off, add 50 minerals back or this or that, something like that. Anyway, let's go on to the second one. Let's keep it in order. Reduce Ultralisk size by 10 to 20% so they don't derp as much. Cool idea. But keep in mind, Ultras are a melee unit, right? Melee units absolutely destroy or absolutely get destroyed. That is how melee units work. They have the best stats in the game. If you gave Zerglings the range of a Marine, do you know how cracked they would be? Like, oh my god, Zealots, Zerglings, these units, like, people sometimes don't realize because people are just bad at fighting and they just like attack into a choke point and all their melee units are stuck behind each other and they're all running into each other's backs and they're like, man, these units suck, man. And then you see like an expert player set up a surround and you're like, holy shizzle fizz. I mean, I'm thinking of like there was a PvP where SOS was way behind and his opponent got +3 Archon Zealot Immortal and they had this great army and SOS had no upgrades and he just literally made like 50 charge zealots and set up this giant surround, and he did like a 270-degree zealot surround and just absolutely destroyed this army that was way better than his simply because he got a good arc and a good angle of attack. And if you get that, you get a good surround. It's crazy. And with the way Ultras against Terran, there's a point before the Terran gets tons of static and ghosts and all this sort of stuff where Ultra Baneling can hit 2 different extreme flanks of the Terran bases. And often the Zerg goes, oh, there's a lot of army here, pulls one of those flanks back, but then they wipe out a base or two on the other side and then pull them back. And it's very hard for the Terran to cover all those flanks unless they're super set up for the late game. So just got to be wary with it. I would not mind trying it out. I'm all for trying out shaking things up a bit and reducing Ultralisk size a little. Why not? Why not? Give it a go. Just be wary. Might have to revert it. Broodlord movement speed buff. Upgrade in the Greater Spire. The Broodlord is already a very cracked unit. So what do I mean? It's awesome. It's badass. It is very fragile, but it's also very cheap. Okay, so the Broodlord has very long range and it throws these little melee units. So similar to a carrier, it messes up your opponent's army, right? If you A-move against someone who has a lot of Broodlords with a ground army, most of your army is spending a lot of its time just fighting Broodlings, right? Unless you've got a lot of splash damage in there to just clear them up. So the Broodlord's already a very good unit. It's got things like Fungal and Vipers. I'm pretty okay with the Broodlord where it is right now, in that it's like, bam, you make 8 Broodlords as a surprise and you push with them before your opponent can get the answer. And they have to try and split their army up and counterattack and try to get a base trade going and all that sort of stuff. So it's it's definitely something to kind of look at. Broodlords, I think sometimes people go, oh man, they're not that good. And then I think they don't cost as much as a carrier or anything. I think they're only 4 supply because it's 2 supply for a Corruptor, 2 for the upgrade. Corruptor is 150, 100, and a Broodlord is... I have no idea how much the Broodlord upgrade is. I feel like it's 150, 150? I have no idea. Twitch chat can let me know. You guys can look that one up for me. Extra hit points on Hydras. I don't think the problem is the hit points on the Hydras. I think the problem with Hydralisks, which have already had their hit points buffed, get out of here. I think that's the sort of change a Zerg player would suggest. That's crazy. Hydralisks already have way too many hit points, guys. They've already gone from 80 to 90. There's no way you're giving them more hit points. The problem is the Hydras get into the game a little bit late and it takes a while for their upgrades to kick in and that sort of stuff. So you could argue like, recombine the Hydralisk upgrades or something like that so they come out a bit earlier, or find a way of... The Hydra kind of suffers from the same thing as the Mutalisk in that in Legacy of the Void, because of the 12 worker start, it's hard to get them out before your opponent just has both done damage to you and got a big economy and then got splash damage. Like, you kind of skip through the tree so much, the tech tree at high level. It's hard for the Hydras to find their window, but I don't think they're far off from being good. Hydra Bane is basically, until the most recent Void Ray Skytoss meta, always been something that comes out, and you'll still occasionally see a Korean mix it in even against those styles. So definitely something to look at. Sorry, this is that's the updated one. We want to look at this one first. He wants Microbial Shroud to stick to a unit that it's casted on. If you did that, I think you'd need to make it a smaller area, but that's okay. It would make it easier to use for noobs. Yeah. Or maybe decrease the duration or something. I think in its current state, if I could just stick that on a queen, I'd be doing a lot more queen infestor pushes versus Skytoss and stuff like that. It seems pretty good, man. Terran, only allow 2 Widow Mines in a medevac rather than 4. So this is a really noob-friendly helper. Now I have a problem with this, and it's how do I beat Protoss's bullshit if I could only fit 2 Widow Mines in a medevac? Now, hold before you guys get angry, Protoss players. So Widow Mine drops can feel a bit oppressive because they're quite hard to handle. So there's this great tip you guys can do out there. It's called build a cannon in each mineral line. Most Terran players will just drop the Widow Mines in range and they'll die before they even burrow, and it's fine. You just put a cannon. So the thing is, a lot of Protoss players will like skip detection, skip cannons. They'll skip all these sorts of things, and sometimes in the mid game, the only way you can really do damage to a Protoss who's, say, going very zealot heavy, big mid game fighting army, and expanding to a very quick 4th, 5th base, is Widow Mine drops, and it's how you keep them in check. And it's the same if you're going to late game in Terran versus Zerg. So as a Terran player, the idea of losing that one very light, high potential damage, and also it's kind of like an APM draining tactic. It forces a big reaction, the Widow Mine drop. So I feel like it's a big nerf to do this to a lot of the Terran styles we've seen in the last years in TVZ, where if you're going 4 command center late game style, you're dropping Widow Mines, you're dropping Widow Mines. We see Maru versus Raynor dropping Widow Mines, just trying to keep him busy, trying to do damage. If that goes down to 2 Widow Mines, it does weaken that a lot. So it's something where I get why you'd want to do this, and at the same time I'm like super cautious, man. I'm like, oh, that is taking away one of the things Terran has that is bullshit. And that's the thing, is every race needs some bullshit. That's the way StarCraft is balanced. So I get where it's coming from, but I don't think I would go ahead with that, because I do think balance has been pretty good. So I think that's more of a Lowko struggling to deal with it. Battle Cruiser, -1 supply. Late game BC switches would be neat. That's cute. I did not read this one when I first glanced at this. That's cute. Sure, I guess. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, that's I don't even know how that pops into your head. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. I don't know, man. I don't know. Some of these switches are weird. Lowko is such a Zerg player, bro. Ghost, -10, -20 hit. Oh, he's saying -10 or -20 hit points. One of the, he's saying knock the hit points off the Ghost. Yeah, you could make the Ghost a little more fragile. It's just the Ghost is such a hard unit to use already. So there are times where you see players just get overwhelmed, because if the Ghosts have to, you know, they get hit by the Banelings or whatever. I think that also weakens them versus Protoss as well, as I believe something Harston pointed out when he was looking at this. So I'm kind of with Harston there on that. I'm like, I don't know, man. Ghosts are already very expensive and stuff. It's kind of interesting. Somehow make landed Vikings a core part of Terran mech armies. Assault mode Vikings deal +2 damage to biological or something like that. So I guess this is an interesting point. So Vikings are like super sick units versus Terran, in terms of like killing tanks and marauders and stuff, and SCVs, and they're good versus stalkers and probes, and they don't actually do bad damage versus immortals. So for those who don't know, they do +8 to mechanical at the moment. So they wreck stalkers and tanks and stuff, but this would basically try to make the Viking a little bit better when it's landed against like zealots, zerglings, roaches, so that it in general has a bit more multi-purpose. It's a very cute idea. That would help versus the zealots, the zerglings, the roaches, and the marines as well. At the same time, I'm kind of okay with the Viking not being that great. Yeah, not being that great, because it is a landed Viking. It shouldn't really be good for everything. I'm going to go against that one. Hyperflight rotors. Banshee speed upgrade cost reduced 25 minerals, 25 gas. This is weak. Make it 100. Take 50 off each. Come on, -25 minerals and 25 gas. That's like, let them eat cake. 25 minerals and 25 gas doesn't mean shit. Get out of here. Make it 50 minerals and 50 gas. It's just too minor. It's too minor. Or is it 200 minerals? I'm pretty sure it's 150 at the moment. Maybe this is a bigger reduction than I realized. Maybe it's not a 200 upgrade, is it? You guys let me know. But yeah, Hyperflight rotors and Cloak both take forever to upgrade. I'm a big Banshee user with my mech in Terran vs Zerg. I do get this upgrade actually over Cloak in the mid game, because I don't care about Cloak, because I'm using Banshees more as a mobile kind of complementary army unit. So I'd be okay with that, because not many people use it. Yeah. Remove High Templar water balloons. So what he means by water balloons is the attack that High Templar got given. So Protoss players, which is of course the race where players don't know how to use control groups, whenever they'd F2, select all army and attack move, their High Templar and spellcasters that don't have an attack would just move through the opponent's army and get themselves killed. So they added this just for Protoss players, because Blizzard hate Terran and Zerg and love Protoss. Protoss is the only team that gets one of their core production structures automatically hotkeyed for them on W, their warp gates. They get things like that. They get the Observer Pervert mode, where they go, an invisible unit should get extra vision range so it sees half the map. I'm kind of joking here, guys. I am kind of joking. It is one of those things where, yeah, just add it to all spellcasters. Give the Infestors a meaningless 5 damage attack that's 5 range, and the Viper, so they don't run in as well. You know, just give it to all of them. Yeah, why not? Sure. Make the game easier. We're trying to make the game more accessible. That's what they did over the years. It's what all games are doing these days. Just, yeah, add it to the other ones. Sure, why not? It's not that important, though. Revert Void Ray build time. We already talked about this. I would also increase the cost or probably lower the movement speed, because it's the flexibility of the movement on those void rays that makes them really oppressive. So I really don't like that. I'm not actually anti-Protoss, Adasi. It's just literally I'm making fun of why Blizzard would make a change for one race and not the others, right? It's like everyone on all the races has that issue. So the fact that they add it for the High Templar is ridiculous. It's really, it's stupid. Like, right? So that's not me saying Protoss players are idiots, lol. Everyone's idiots. Everyone walks their infestors to their death and they're vipers, right? Everybody does this. Why would they only do it? Why would they only do it for Protoss? It's really, why does the Raven not get an attack? How many of us have ran our Raven in and got it killed? So it's one of these things where you look at an issue like that and it was relatively minor, whereas Terran has a lot more trouble managing an army with all the different siege units and stim and spellcasters and stuff, where the army gets a lot more convoluted. So the fact that they gave that to High Templar is a sore point for me, because I'm like, why wouldn't you just do it for all of them? So for me, it was just one of these changes where Blizzard, they got much better at working over the years, and who knows what the current Blizzard team is doing, because they're kind of silent, all quiet on the Western Front. But basically, it's just one of those things where there's certain things like they left the assimilators having double the hit points of the other team's gases for no reason. For like 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it was, they basically just like, assimilators have double hit points, which was like a little fix they put in when Reapers would jump in people's bases and they had an anti-building satchel charge attack and they'd kill the Protoss gas and run away. And the Protoss couldn't afford enough sentries to defend the one-base stim attack coming up the ramp. It was like, this is... there was just like these weird changes they never fixed, and then they'd come in and do something like that, and I was like, no! Why would they do it for one? Do it for everybody. That's me complaining over. So anyway, it's just one of those things. Just do it for every spellcaster. Increase the cooldown on battery overcharge a little. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I think that's okay. It is kind of a bummer when the overcharge kicks in a second time during a battle and then a third time, and you're like, oh my god, this is kind of crazy. So that is yeah, potentially something you could change. I think something I never realized when they first brought battery in is just how strong batteries were because of the way they can heal the cannons in front of them. And normally static defense can't centralize its power as much because the buildings are quite chunky. But you can have like 5 cannons getting healed by 5 shield batteries, and like the cannons aren't dying very well, and you're like, oh, and it's actually, and you add that little bit of splash damage to that, and it's just like this beautiful combination of defense. Whereas, and I still think the battery is much better than the mothership core, because Protoss needs something to help make them more solid, because Protoss just has so few units to work with early, and you need something to back up your shit. It used to be the mothership core, nowadays it's the shield battery. I think the shield battery is a much less offensive thing to deal with. For anyone who's only played in the last 2 years or whatever and is like, no, shield batteries are bullshit, pig, which a lot of people say, just like go watch some games of like someone goes to Doom Drop and they're not looking because there's so much fighting going on, and the Protoss has the mothership core floating in the edge of their main, and they spot the drop and they overcharge 6 pylons and kill a Doom Drop with 60 army supply with a 2 supply hero unit. And you're like, oh. So that was as annoying as the shield battery is to play against, it's a necessary evil. And if you guys play a bunch of Protoss, you will realize how fragile Protoss players are and why you really should attack them more and try to find a way in. Because Protoss is a civilization, a race that is really weak, really strong, really weak, really strong. They have these natural points where their army is very weak, they're very fragile. So you can get in there and just snap them. But if you sit there and let a Protoss player do whatever they want, you will find Protoss very hard to play against. So he wants the Colossus damage to be a bit better, more well-rounded. So it's better versus Roaches and Marauders. It's not such an anti-marine specialist again. So that's actually totally fine, guys, because I kind of like that idea, because think about how many times these days, if you get your army EMP'd as Protoss, you just need to run away. You can have like 4 Colossus, and if they get a good Marauder arc where the Marauders are spread out, you're not doing much damage at all. You're doing so little damage to those Marauders, right? So it's this kind of thing where you're like, oh, this is actually really, it'd be cool to have them be a little bit more well-rounded. That being said, I don't really know if there's like actually a big issue there, but if you're going to say nerf Protoss in some ways, then that would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Just try and, try and make these things a little bit more palatable, right? Oh, okay, we're going to nerf your Void Ray or something, but we're going to make your Colossus a bit better, more well-rounded. Doesn't weaken it versus Marines, just makes it a little stronger versus Marauders and Roaches, which is cool. Observers can be built from the Nexus once a Robo is built. Sorry, guys. I've been studying phrenology, skull shape lately. And I can't believe I didn't notice it before, but yep, serial killer. Serial killer. I didn't realize before, and I've hung out with Simon a bunch. It's very subtle, but you can see from the arch of the temple, combined with the shape of the eyes and the jawline, serial killer. Who in their right mind would suggest observers being built out of Nexi? Can you imagine playing PvT where you kill like 3 observers with 3 scans and you're like, well, thank God they can't replace those if they want to keep up Colossus production. And they're like, nah, I'll skip 2 probes and just have like 2 more observers out. Lol, lol. You are, no, crazy. Bad, Lowko, bad. Bad suggestion. I bet he changes that. I bet he got a lot of flack for that one. And he changes that in his review. We'll find out in a moment. We will find out. Bad, Lowko. Bad. Yeah, who cares about it costing a probe observers build in no time, guys? That's crazy. That's crazy. The reasoning is obs take up too much build time on the Robo. That's part of the balancing act of you can't just make invisible units that watch half the map for free. They're meant to cost something. Harsam said he likes it. You're kidding me. Yeah, I'm sure he had a big... He's like, oh, I think this is a really fair and balanced suggestion. Get out of here. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's so dumb. That's so dumb. Chat says that's why Stargate is so popular. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not that at all. It's nothing to do with the observers taking up build time. Get out of here, chat. Nothing to do with that, mate. Phoenix, he wants Phoenix to have a bit more well-rounded damage as well. So he wants to make a lot of the Protoss units more well-rounded. The other units, the non-void. Was this him just not wanting to get flack? Like, honestly, this is the most Protoss-favored patch I've ever seen. He wants to nerf Terran to the ground. He wants to, well, okay, he wants to nerf his lurker. He just wants to give himself Hydra and Microbial shroud buffs. And then he just wants to make Protoss sick. What's going on? Has Lowko been off-racing Protoss a lot, guys? Give me some info. I don't know what's going on. I think that's fine. It's pretty minor. They're both pretty minor, the Colossus and the Phoenix change. I'm like, whatevs. I think these are some really good notes. Queens are too well-rounded. That would be a game-changing, huge change. So I don't think at this late life cycle of StarCraft, we would be focusing on, oh, let's change a fundamental feature of Zerg like Queens. Because I think that involves quite a bit of a race redesign. So that's something where it's like, maybe you just tone down the most offensive feature. Like you tone down transfuse a little bit more or something like that. We'll see. Ghosts have too much power overall. In TVP, you can make that argument. I don't think they do in TVZ. I really don't think they do in TVZ at all. As much as that's the late game bio unit, they're really hard to use. You're kind of forced to turtle up a lot to make use of them. They are a bit all-purpose late game, but I mean, everyone else gets all-purpose units. I don't know if I really... I would say maybe the EMP is a little bit oppressive against Protoss, but Protoss has Blink DTs and Disruptors. So unless you're going to touch those, you can't do anything about EMP. So I don't know. Swarmhosts are a bit weak in standard games. I think Swarmhosts are still fantastic. Fantastic units. And you don't want them to be a standard unit. Just the way they operate. Swarmhosts are meant to be a special unit for special situations, for special builds, because it literally is the worst sort of mum you want. You have ever imagined. Literally, she's just popping out babies and then she flings them at her opponents. Like it's messed up from the design perspective, right to the ethical perspective of should we be employing bad mothers to throw their children as weapons. It's terrible. So Swarmhosts, I mean, they throw free units. What's cool about Swarmhosts is they give a map control focus to the game. I think swarm hosts are still incredible units. People just don't use them in pro level right now, and therefore that hasn't, people on the low levels go, swarm hosts bad, because they're not using them correctly. I still think the swarm hosts are a very, very powerful unit, and yeah, I think especially against mech, they're very, very good. So the cooldown is so long, you need a massive map to make use of them, says Big Dates. On the other hand, though, they can get into position to throw a much more deadly wave on a smaller map. So I still think swarm hosts are a pretty fantastic unit on, I think mid-sized maps are usually best for them. Like a Berlingrad, probably pretty good for swarm hosts, I think. If the supply cost is ridiculous, it needs to be. They spawn free units. You can play on a much lower drone count than normal when you go swarm hosts. What do you think of nerfing the Broodlord and Carrier out of the game, says Yo-Yo. Not really necessary. Just get rid of the Void Ray battery early game and I think it's alright. But that is it. Cloaked Widow Mines are kind of dumb. I don't know about that. I think that's a map control thing. I think it's, if you fight for map control and you don't let your opponents set up Widow Mines everywhere, they're fine. And if you do, and they get momentum and they get control, especially in Terran versus Zerg, yes, they can be very hard to deal with. But that's why, just as much as the Terran's dropping you all game, you as the Zerg should be doing Ling Bane run-bys and queuing those in and keeping the Terran busy. And if you do that, it's going to be hard for them to set up kind of out on the map. And if you've ever played it from both sides, Terran versus Zerg, TVP, you know, just as often a Colossus Observer goes around and just cleans up the Widow Mines. There's other games where you're kiting them into Widow Mines all game and all the Zealots are dying. It can go both ways. So I disagree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong there with the Cloaked Widow Mines. A necessary piece of power for the Terran. So overall, guys, to sum up, Lurker Speed Burrow, absolutely I would nerf the crap out of that. I'd nerf the Void Ray a bunch as well. I'd probably aim for its maneuverability or cost rather than build time personally. Thank you, Beanmeister, for 16 months. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much for the love. 18 months, actually. Thank you, mate. Yeah, all the others are just cute little changes. Honestly, I'm still sticking at my guns, guys. There's two things that need to change. The Void Ray needs to get nerfed. The Lurker needs to get nerfed. Lurker nerf will make Protoss more confident playing ground versus Zerg. And Void Ray nerfing will stop Protoss from literally just making Void Ray 3-base shield battery every single game and creating a very dull meta where the Zergs are walking queens across the map and the Protoss players are trying to stop it. And if it's not that, it's mega late game snooze fest. So yeah, I don't know. Overall, I think balance is pretty good right now. I think there's some really cool ideas in here to do other things. The only thing that really excites me is the idea of making the queen not as well-rounded. Like for me, what gets me excited in terms of Zerg balance on a more general level outside of the ZVP paradigm is something, we can just go like WordPad here. Basically, the idea is that gets me excited, right? It's, like size 36, 48, make it big. There we go. So I love that the dot point doesn't get bigger. Go WordPad. So basically, to make Zerg more interesting, Queen's way weaker, Ravager's weaker, Lurker's weaker. And you guys are gonna be like, what the shit, Pig? So you just want to make Zerg not good? Bane's weaker, even? Maybe? Right? More lava. More economy. Worse units. So basically what I'd be talking about here is more of a return. So basically we'd be talking about kind of like a return. And this is just exciting because I like things that are fresh, right? So what would be exciting is a return to HOTS and Wings, where Zerg is up a base. And so chat's like, but Zerg are insanely inefficient. They get beat by 3 base against half map Zerg. Well, so this is why this would have to pair in with other changes, right? So Zerg is up a base the whole game. The problem is Zerg never gets ahead in Legacy of the Void. You guys have got to keep that in mind. Zerg is literally even on workers basically the whole game for the most part. You could argue against Terran, they get a little more ahead, but it's the Terran always catches up. So anyway, I don't actually think this is something we could implement, but it just gets me excited because it's fun. So Zerg is up a base the whole game, but you don't have the insane defensive power of queens blocking all harass, right? I know that's obviously, oh, queens beat everything, right? But obviously it doesn't really block everything, but they can block most of the early harassers on their own, right? So we don't have that or Ravager Morph stopping committed pushes, right? So what do I mean? Often 8 roaches is not that good versus like an Immortal Sentry, but you make 8 Ravagers suddenly. When you don't know the push is coming, you see it, you morph 8 Ravagers, suddenly you've got this amazing army for stopping an Immortal Sentry push. So there's this real awesome, powerful units where you can play correctly. So it's one of these things where it would be really cool if we could nerf the Queen a little bit. I don't know exactly how that would happen, but this would all have to come in with not just more workers, but I think this might only work if we went to a slower worker start. That would allow you to tech up at a relatively faster rate. So the problem with Zerg tech, right, in Legacy of the Void is it takes so long to kick in. So going past the Ravagers, the Lings, and so on to say Hydras or Mutas, it hits much later in the game relative to when it did in Heart of the Swarm or Wings of Liberty. Because your choice to say go 2 base Muta in Legacy, you're already at a giant economy and your opponent is as well, and they can take a third and there's not that much differentiation. But if you were doing a 2 base Muta build in Wings or Hots, your lair would be starting up way quicker, your opponent would still be saturating their natural, and your Spire's already halfway done. And it would just give you sharper tech timings and that sort of stuff, and it would give you a different asymmetry. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying remove the Ravager and the Queen and the Lurker, because Heart of the Swarm and Wings were so frustrating, where you couldn't break up a force field up your ramp or something like that. Like someone would force field your ramp, and just, you'd be like, I'm dead, I can't get back into my main base, I have no way of breaking force field. Like, there's stupid shit like that, right? But on the other hand, it would be interesting just to shake things up, because there's a lot of times where it does feel like a Zerg doesn't even know they're getting attacked in Legacy of the Void, and then they're like, oh, you're coming, and then they just make units and defend, and you're like, in Hots and Wings, there was a lot more scouting and knowing what's coming minutes ahead of time, and then still struggling to defend. But even when you're up on workers, whereas in Legacy, it's like, I made 8 queens, and I didn't even know what was happening, but I built Zerglings reactively, and I stopped your attack. Now, I don't know if that's a bad thing or not. I mean, there's some really cool details that still go on in the game. But for me, outside of just changing that dynamic, I wonder, and this is a point of curiosity that's not exceptionally thought out, what it would be like to go back and play that style of game. Would I just go, no, this is just objectively worse? Because the one thing I really miss is like how late mutas kick in Legacy of the Void, and how long your opponents have to scout and prepare for it is something that kind of frustrates me. And you know, you could hit it much earlier in those games, and it felt like you had a little bit more choice about how to play. I still think you have many choices in Legacy, but definitely it feels like you skip the early game a little bit. And for me, I love small skirmishes and I love early game, so it's really interesting to kind of think about where it goes. Wings of Liberty was extremely boring in the first few minutes, says Pixel. So that's the thing, is a lot of people have the attention span of a peanut these days. So if you're not interested in actually learning the build order, I admit it's just more interesting to watch pro players pass the early game. Unless you're part of the 1% that's like, I need to study the opening. What does he do with his second villager? And that's why you do have separate modes. In Age of Empires, for instance, where the start, Age of Empires 2 is really slow. I think it's the most fun part, and most people play the slow mode because it's more satisfying choosing what you're doing very consciously in the early game, and little details really mattering in terms of how you build up. But what a lot of players don't have there is that some people are like, no, I just want to micro units, right? But what's more of a deal is the observing side for pro stuff. Most people don't want to watch that early when there's no interaction. They want to see interaction. So if no one's rushing, no one's cheesing, it can be very dull for the first 5 minutes, especially watching, right? And that's why in Age of Empires 2, they have a thing called Empire Wars, where it's literally you start with 30 villages rather than 4 or 5 or whatever the normal villages is in Age of Empires 2. And that's what most of their tournaments are played on, because it just skips the early game and it just gets into the action. It's like you start with the standard setup and you play from there. So as much as for my own enjoyment, I would love to explore this, it would be bad for esports and for watching StarCraft. I think it would be fun for me as a mega nerd and for the mega hardcore fans to like really taste the slight variations in the openings as it slowly builds up and what every worker does and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see. What do you think about 9 workers start instead of 12? Yeah, I mean, that would be a nice in-between, but we'll see. So anyways, back on point, guys. Let's see what Lowko changed in his video. Get out of here. He reverted. Okay, guys, Lurker's Lowko. I just said Lurker. So Lowko has gone back on nerfing the burrow speed. The burrow speed is ridiculous. Get rid of the burrow speed. Your first suggestion was correct. This is dumb. Get rid of this shit. It's the mobility that's the big problem. I mean, you could nerf the damage. It's a different way to approach it, definitely. You could nerf the damage or the range as well. But I do think get rid of their mobility, for me, is going to be totally fine. I'm okay with siege units doing crazy damage, but if you flank them, then that's going to be good. You don't have the whole thing in that frame, pig. Oh, really? He scrolled down? Oh. Scroll up, Lowko. Oh, okay, he kept that one. Okay, yeah. So basically, at the moment, Adaptive Talons goes almost 3 times faster burrow speed. Yeah, slow it down. I mean, keep it at 2 seconds. Honestly, I think Adaptive Talons should only change their movement speed. I think this is too weak of a change. I just don't see why a siege unit should be able to like... Otherwise, why don't you give tanks and liberators siege upgrades? Why doesn't transformation servos make a tank siege twice as fast? Why? Because it would be really frustrating to play against. Same thing with this. 1.2 seconds, still very fast. I really don't like it. Lurker damage output is too high for 10 range. Yep, reduce queen anti-air range by 1 from 7 to 6. Wow, really? They used to be 8 range, guys. They used to be 8. He wants to bring him down to 6. Maybe? Maybe, man? Maybe I'll give it a try. Or playing at low level, I think that's fair. Versus pro oracles though. If I'm playing versus, like I played Creator the other day in the weekly, if I'm playing versus his oracle with a 6 range queen, I might just have to commit Sudoku. That would be painful, man. Okay. Viper abducts have a 1 second cooldown. Yeah, that's fair. So they can't spam abducts off one thing. Neuroparasite can't be casted from burrowed. Totally fair. I'm fine with that. Broodlord from 4 supply to 6. Ah, okay. Yeah, if you're going to nerf the Broodlord, that would be it. I like that he went from give them a speed upgrade to make them cost more supply. That's hilarious. His initial one was like, oh, these guys need a speed upgrade. And now he's like, make them cost more supply. They're too good. I'm sure he got some feedback on his first thread, guys. Protoss, remove High Templar water balloons or add it to all spellcasters, revert void ray build time. Yep. Oh, okay, he did. He said, hey, let's get rid of the void ray base move speed. Yes, good job. So he's having some good ideas. He got some good feedback. Shield batteries start with less energy. Not a bad idea. Observers can be built from the nexus once a robo facility is built. No, delete that. How did you not second guess this one? Oh, get out of here. How can you still think this is a good idea? We've got to hear his reasoning.
A little bit much, so maybe go with one of the two rather than both. But I think shield batteries starting with less energy would make sense, especially in those like offensive void ray.
The eyes of a serial killer. Look at his face as he justifies this.
The fact that the shield batteries start with full energy is a little bit silly. Right now, though, we see, obviously, with battery overcharge, batteries time to begin. Jesus. A lot of a row very less powerful. All right, now this one is one of the changes that I've seen a lot of very positive responses to. Observers can be built from the nexus once a robo facility is built. I think this is a really cool change that I think makes a lot of sense. One of the reasons why robo play is difficult is because of the fact that it's hard to actually build all of the things at once. The observers, they share build time with the Immortal, with the Prism, with the Colossus, with all of those units, right? And it just makes it difficult to actually decide what you want to be building. Obviously, right now it would share...
Hold on, can the people in chat please link me Harstem? Link me a timestamped link to Harstem's video saying he likes this. I cannot believe he would say he agrees with this without being sarcastic. Now, Harstem can be kind of dry sometimes. You guys might not have noticed he was being sarcastic. Please get me a timestamped link, because there is no way a sane person thinks this is legit for PvT. Maybe in Protoss vs Zerg, where observers can get dealt with by overseers, but this is actually insane.
Build time with the probe, so you would have to cut a probe in order to be able to make an observer. But
it's a probe for an observer. You've got chrono boost, you've got 3 bases up. It doesn't matter. That doesn't cost you anything, mate.
I think it would be fine. I don't think it would be too powerful. Maybe there's going to be some killer immortal sentry sort of push where normally you would hit like...
No! Observer doesn't matter in that scenario, mate. It's about the ability for a Protoss player to cover the map in observers in PvT. It's crazy. Chat says observers get wiped by scans quickly. You know that's a net positive for the Protoss, spending 100 resources to stop them mining 225. That's assuming they see the blur, which is almost impossible, and that you don't just set up the observer in some position where it's literally out of their vision and it sees everything. You guys are insane. Please keep sharing your opinions. I like disagreeing with you guys. It's fun.
15 seconds later because of the observer and stuff. Maybe it's going to be a little bit too much, but I think this would be a cool change, and it's going to make things way more reliable. Originally, I even suggested making observers cost no supply, because if you've ever played any Protoss, you know how blind you are for the majority of the game.
What? How blind you are? Hello? Does he think Terran is Protoss? Does he think these guys are these guys? He must. I don't. Does he not understand? This guy with the gun, that guy, they're Terran. These guys are Protoss. You see Max Packs, these ones are Protoss. His thumbnails seem to be correct. It says Protoss coaching Lowko. That's what comes up. What are you talking about, Lowko? Who's blind? What matchup is... The only time you're blind is if you're sitting at home with Void Ray Cannon battery all game, mate. Oracles, observers, bloody hallucinations. You've got lots of good scouting tools, mate. Get out of here.
Like, Terran has scans basically infinitely in the late game, or at least that's...
Terran scans infinitely in the late game. Okay, guys, we're talking about when the Iron Bank's complete. Just give me a moment. Can we just have a bit of a handshake, please? I'm going to build 10 orbital command centers, and then I'll be able to... And then I admit, guys, I always say if you can get up like 10 orbitals, you have the best scouting, and you can drop mules like crazy, and Terran's really good. Maru tries to do this a lot, and while he sometimes gets there, sometimes what happens is Cyril says, hey, Maru, puts his hand around him, and Maru goes, hey, buddy, I'm just building some command centers. And Cyril goes, I know. And then he grabs his head and he smashes it repeatedly into the table with Hydraling Bane, and Maru dies before he gets there, and then his body falls limp on the ground, and we go, yeah, it's kind of hard to get the Iron Bank up, because I've seen Maru just get his face bludgeoned in trying to do it. And Maru's better than... He's like the best player in the world right now. And even he struggles to get up to it sometimes. But like, it is technically, when you get there, it's the best. The same way battle cruisers are like the best endgame unit, guys. They're like the best endgame unit.
My man.
You just need to, I don't know, have 10 bases and 1 billion monies. And then you can just have Yamato everything. It's great. Just Yamato everything. Why don't you just make Mass Raven battle cruiser? What? It's crazy.
That's what it seems like. Zerg has creep spread, and they can see the entire map combined with overlords. Protoss is just sort of sitting there, and you have to be a lot more active about it. I think observers built from the nexus and maybe even costing 0 supply would be fine.
Okay, so against Zerg, observers don't help so much with map vision, right? Because Zerg players will bring overseers around to clean them up, right? So the most useful observer is like earlier in the game, and then if they can get around and siege up in the middle of their production and they don't notice it, that's one of the best ones against Zerg. But the real problem that I have with this is Terran. I just can't believe, like for me as against Terran, it's just that the observer is such a good scout and Terran has such shitty detection, and you know, he's saying Protoss is really blind. I feel like anyone that's not Zerg is more blind. Zerg is naturally the race. I've said maybe we should nerf creep vision for a while to make it more, because Protoss and Terran have to commit a bit more for map vision. But I love that Loco's putting himself out here. Don't go and attack him. Pig said you're wrong, you idiot. Don't go and attack Loco, guys. We're having fun.
I mean, they're still
But let's listen to the rest of what he says.
75 gas each, so they're pretty expensive.
Good point. They are still 75 gas each. It's not like you can just afford to build 20 of them. So that's a good point. Someone in chat pointed that out as well. So it's not that big, but it definitely makes a difference where there is a lot of points, because I love robo-focused styles versus Terran, right? Colossus, Immortal Disruptor, all such powerful units that can game change. But there are so many points where if I can just build 3-4 more observers and get map vision everywhere, the Terran, I'm always going to be ready wherever he comes from. Disruptors are so much better. My Blink Stalkers can stop every drop. So it's just one of those things. I don't think they should go down to half a supply. I think they should still cost supply. In late game, the Zerg has 10 queens. That's 20 supply. Pretty much wasted. All this sort of stuff. So this is definitely one of the issues. Chat says Protoss ground sucks. Go play some Terran and Zerg. Sorry. Unfortunately, Protoss players, there's too many cuck Protosses on the ladder right now, so they're all playing Void Rays. It does not suck. Protoss ground is fucking awesome. Lurkers are a bit bullshit, but Protoss ground is awesome. I love Protoss ground, man.
But maybe costing 0 supply would be a little bit too much. Either way, I think being able to build them from the Nexus would be a reasonable buff.
Shut your mouth, serial killer. Shut your mouth. You are so wrong. You're so wrong!
That happens. Next, the observers can be built from the Nexus once a robo facility is built. This is a cool suggestion, which I'm really surprised that Lowko suggests this, because this is a Protoss specific issue. This is something that a Protoss would say, and then the other two races say, "Oh, that sounds stupid." But yes, this is a really cool change, because often in any matchup, honestly, the observer feels like a waste of your robotics facility time. To build, because you want to be getting immortals, prisms, and you're often giving something up in terms of vision in order to get other things. Now, I think this is not necessarily that bad as a trade-off. I actually think that is not that bad of an idea. That there is a trade-off for getting more vision. Now, of course, there's still a trade-off if you have nexi, because then you're cutting probes, but because, yeah, I don't know. It feels like you have more options to get a lot of vision, and especially against Terran, I think this could be slightly problematic.
Slightly problematic. Massaging that one in there, aren't you, a little bit? Especially against Terran, it might be slightly problematic. I'm sorry, mate. Slightly problematic. I've cast special playing a PvT where that observer just like... We got a fire alarm test. It's the monthly fire alarm test. Here we go, everybody. Because apparently my building needs a monthly fire alarm test. Interrupting the content as it always does. Back on point. There's too many times. If you're gonna even consider something like this, you need to nerf the observer vision. The observer should not get extra vision when it sieges up. This is a huge problem. They basically put the observer in as a unit where they said, cool, observer, people are F2ing their observers around with a select all army key. We need to make it easier for them to not screw that up. beat your fucking self, mate. And then they said, oh, well, because it can't move, we'll give it a bit of extra vision. But it's like, it's way too much extra vision at the moment, where we would see like Zest regularly see his whole opponent's army move out without them ever seeing the observer, because they can put it so far away. So the observer vision on the siege up is way too good. And that's something which I think is actually a pressing need in PvT. But yeah, maybe a slight problem in PvT. You better clarify that and say it's a big problem, mate.
If you want to increase the amount of observers that are being built, there needs to be more of a downside of observers. Make them more clear for people to see, even when they're invisible. Make there be a little bit of like buzzing audio when you're centered on an observer. Like things like this could be done, like an audio warning that an observer is nearby. This way you still force your opponent to have some type of detection there, but it also alerts them that there is an observer, because it's very frustrating for the other two races when they're not aware that there's an observer near. So whenever they're in observer mode, you could just constantly have them play like a buzzing noise or something like that, and when they're just regularly flying around, not have that be. But I think this is...
And this is perfect. Thank you, great Lord Harstem. It's so frustrating, especially as a Terran player, where you don't just have an overseer that just super cheap unit that unlocks. So I really agree, guys. They absolutely should be clearer to see or have a buzzing noise or something, or they should get rid of the siege up, like I said. There's got to be something there, because they're really annoying to deal with as Terran. You could argue just give Terran better detection and it's fine, right? That's totally... You can build a Raven out of a reacted starport. Would solve a lot of Terran's detection problems, right? Something like that. Now, obviously, that's kind of insane, because Ravens... They're pretty fucking good units. I'm not going to go down that line. That's its own discussion, right? But the whole point there being that, yeah, observers are really annoying. So I know there's only an intern working at Blizzard on StarCraft right now, so he might not be able to get audio working, though. So if they don't already have audio files on hand, I actually had a mosquito buzzing around my ear last night. I think that should be the sound effect. So I'm going to record a mosquito buzzing next to your ear in the middle of the night. And we're going to have that. So if you have to get beyond 50% zoom in, though. So you know how sometimes you'll zoom the camera in to try and see the observer better, or rotate the camera. If you zoom in even a little bit and there's an observer on the screen, you'll hear bzzz, and it'll only come through one speaker as well. It'll only come through one side. So bzzz, and you'll be like, this fucking observer, shit. And then you'll scan and kill it. So perfect, right? Problem solved. I'm okay with you making observers easier to build, because at least you can effing find them then.
This is a cool suggestion that I never would have thought of, that I think with one or two tweaks, like I mentioned, definitely could be workable. The Phoenix from damage 5 to +5 to light to 6 +4.
All right, I don't care about the rest. I just wanted to hear his response to that. We're not going to respond to everyone's videos responding to them responding to the videos.
And another...
All right, let's see what else. Reduce the Archon size. Yeah, that's a cute quality of life, so they don't get stuck as much. I like that. We've all recalled our Archons and got them stuck in our mineral line before. Carrier supply up, just to make him a bit less power, a bit harder to mass up, and lowering the attack damage so it's not getting such crazy benefits from upgrades. Now, this one might seem like a big nerf, guys. This interceptors are merged. Sorry, let me scroll that up so it's higher on our screen. So this one might seem huge, but it's actually not that big, because armor upgrades cancel out both attack upgrades. So what do I mean? Basically, interceptors normally do 5 damage times 2. So they go pew pew, pew pew, each interceptor, right? So it goes 5 + 1. Now, normally, a lot of units that do about, say, 10 damage get +1, right? So a Hydralisk does like, what, 12 damage a shot? It goes 12 + 1 with an upgrade. It gets 13. Whereas the Interceptor does effectively 10 damage, and it gets +2, so it goes 12. So that's obviously upgrades are way better. But because there's 2 attacks, each armor upgrade affects it twice as well. So the only thing here this changes is the fact that it's not as big for you when you're ahead on upgrades of attack versus their armor. But if you guys were both at +3 attack versus +3 armor, it will still be the exact same amount of damage being dealt. I hope that explains that. So just keep in mind, this would affect, it would weaken a +2 carrier attack timing versus a Zerg who only has +1 carapace or no carapace upgrades, but it wouldn't otherwise. Now, someone in chat says, no, it won't. It would be more damage. No, it wouldn't. It would be the exact same. It would make no difference there. If you guys want to disagree, please tell me why. Explain why in detail, and I will debunk and tell you why you're wrong. Sound cue is discriminatory to deaf players. I mean, they're not actually going to do any of this, so obviously, don't worry, Code and Bite. They're not actually going to do that. But yeah, that is a consideration to be taken into account. This is why I wouldn't be running a balance patch on my own, because I'd just throw random meme shit in there, and I would never want to be a balance designer for Blizzard. Hard job, man. Biggest problem with the Protoss changes, they don't actually solve issues with Protoss beyond Void Rays. Pretty weak mid-game for PvZ. Every 3-base Zerg timing is just going to roll over a Protoss. Well, this is why, like, you know, I definitely don't think you should, like, upgrade the Hydra hit points and stuff like Loco's saying. Like I said, bit of a serial killer. What a High Templar water balloons mean, that's the attack on the High Templar. They added a regular attack on it. It does very little damage, but it just stops them from moving to their death. Yeah. So if you combined the... Okay, so people did have a good point about the interceptors. It would buff carriers versus units that already have naturally high armor. So that's something I didn't mention. That's actually a very good point. I didn't take that into account, Code and Bite. So that's definitely a big deal. So when you account for base armor, yes, absolutely. So any unit with base armor is going to be less effective versus the carrier. That is a good point. So for instance, guys, the Corruptor would have it's a 2 base armor unit, very tanky unit, right? So the interceptors would do 2 times 3, 6 damage if you're both on 0/0, whereas in this case it would just be 10 minus 2, 8 damage, right? So you would be much stronger versus those high armor units with the carriers. So that's a very good point, chat. So Boanan, that's what Boanan was making the same point. Yeah, you guys were talking about Corruptors. Versus like a Marine, it makes no difference. Versus a Zealot makes no difference, because those units that have no armor on them, right? But anything with armor, it will be a little bit weaker verse. Anything with armor, it'll be weak. It'll be stronger verse, sorry. So that's a very good point from Boanan and Codon. Thank you guys. Is High Templar movement speed slower than other spellcasters? They're all pretty slow. I'm not sure what the differences are. All right, Liberators now benefit from smart servos like Thor's and Hellbat's Hellions. Are you serious? I was just pointing out you need to nerf the lurker speed more. He wants to make them... Well, maybe. I mean, this is a different way of approaching it. Rather than nerfing the lurker burrow speed to the ground, like I suggested, he's like, just also make Liberators be able to siege super sick, super fast. I mean, ranged libs are already such a sick unit, especially versus Protoss, but I do like the idea from a Terran and Zerg perspective of giving them both really imber units that siege up instantly. And Protoss is like, hello? And we're like, you have the disruptor, you don't need one, get out of here, Protoss player. And they're like, can we get a Stimpact siege unit as well that instant sieges, please? And we're like, no, you get disruptors. You shut your mouth, dirty Protoss. That's cute. That's cute. I mean, I don't know. My instinct is no siege units are meant to be slow and immobile so that you can outposition them. And that's part of the trade-off. So I think make the lurker less mobile, keep the Liberator and the siege tank as immobile as they are right now, and that their siege and unsiege is kind of slow. So I really do like that. Libs unsiege so slowly that they usually get blasted first, says Crazy Corey. Really depends. If you're pinned back, definitely Liberators don't feel that great positionally. But if you manage to like have any momentum, if your opponent's out of position at all and your libs siege up correctly, they are pretty damn insane. Yeah. Thank you guys. All right, I think that's about it. I'm gonna finish up there. He's still same kind of suggestions here. He says, hey, go steady targeting the ghost snipe, lower the damage, but make it so it can't get interrupted and it shoots faster. I think that's a cool idea, so that the ghost does a bit less damage, but it's a little bit less fragile in terms of its snipes. I feel like that's too far reaching for me to really mentally process. It would still one-shot a High Templar and like an Infestor and stuff like that, but yeah, be interesting. It would obviously be a bit spammable is one of the problems, right? If you're gonna do that, you'd have to probably pair that with like the ghost getting its hit points nerfed or something like he suggested, I think. Make it a bit more fragile. But yeah, be interesting to see how that goes. Anyway, guys, that's my exceptionally long thoughts on Lowko's balance. I think we learned a few things from this video. Lowko's an effing psychopath, and if I ever see this, if I ever see the two bloody completely snow white eyes and a blizzard of teeth in a dark alleyway at night, I'm gonna run the other way as quickly as possible. That's what I've learned. So yeah, the man wants to be allowed to build observers out of Nexi. He's sick in the head. Don't watch his content. And thank you, Simon, honestly, for putting out a thread and then a video, which has got us all talking and discussing things. I think this has been really interesting. Food for thought. I think he's got some really cool ideas. I disagree with some of them, and obviously I was trying to just be a bit silly, but a mix of us making fun of Lowko and at the same time letting you guys know my thoughts, and it's just kind of stream of consciousness. So hopefully you guys got something out of this video. I know it's a bit of a kind of long, drawn out processing of many different things and talking about it. Thank you everyone who agreed and disagreed with me in chat. Remember, those of you who disagreed, you're all wrong. Those of you who agreed are all right. Let me know in the comments section your own suggestions, things you're looking forward to, or generally whatever you're bloody excited to see in the future of RTS games, StarCraft, or otherwise. Good night, guys.